What's going on, everybody? It's Devontae back with a new video. There might be issues if you're motivated by self-interest as opposed to fear. You're probably going to have it a little bit harder than other people. Recently, I've been flirting with this idea that was presented to me by way of Nassim Nicholas Taleb, which it says that he's a mathematical statistician, but how he introduced himself was an options trader, someone who worked in, I guess, finance to some capacity, and he expounds upon these ideas of volatility, being an options trader, and how life is volatile, and that the people who have more success with life are the people who embrace that volatility and they become anti-fragile. One of the examples he gives is of a coffee cup that cracks easily if you drop it. Pressure is applied, a lot of volatility. But if it's consistent small taps from this, I don't know, this consistently tapping a coffee cup is not going to break it. Dropping it will. So it introduces the idea that when variable of volatility is added, if something is fragile, it'll break easier. If something is anti-fragile, it will endure it. The gist of my channel is not only self-discovery, self-improvement, but also employment. How that relates back to capitalism, because that is the structure that we live in, is what are you motivated by? Are you motivated by self-interest or fear? So there's this particular lecture where he talks about employees being motivated by fear, because fear is reliability. Fear is the leverage is controlled by the person that owns you, which at a job that you sign up for, but without it you would starve. Self-interest would be a contractor, maybe a business owner. Now, are they still beholden to their contract and in their clients to some degree? Absolutely. But the dynamic is much different, and there's not fear of losing it because it can be replaced, whereas being an employee is more akin to what he considers modern day slavery. The quote from Napoleon that he referenced was, "Men are moved by two levers only, self-interest and fear." And what I want to present to you today is why I think that in an employee structure, if you are somebody that's still pursuing jobs, but you are motivated more so by self-interest than being afraid of losing that job, being afraid of not doing things wrong, being afraid of rebutting against certain feedback that you don't think is constructive, rebutting against a system that you don't think works properly. If you are somebody that has a strong sense of standing up for things that you don't think make sense, you're going to have a hard time if you're somebody that leans more into self-interest than fear. So there's degrees of respect that come with somebody who's motivated by self-interest and then fear. With fear, it's more of a subservience. It's less of a mutual partnership that you would think contract work was, or having a business partner, owning a business. That's more of a mutual contract. Whereas an employee, you are subservient. You are in most cases for a lot of people, a warm body in the spot that can be replaced like that. Can contracts be replaced? Can other businesses be built? Absolutely. The dynamic changes drastically. And I've also seen that a lot of people in employer relationships are treated more like children. They're infantilized. There's different degrees of respect for people who are motivated by self-interest or volatility, and then people motivated by fear, which is reliability. You also have more freedom of choice as someone motivated by self-interest. So people ever say that people choose to work where they want. Two things can be true at the same time. It's something that I learned from watching a channel called Anton Daniels. People can choose what they want and also have the illusion of choice. So these choices are illusory. You can get a job, but you have to understand that you have to take what you can, especially as we move on and on and on, as people are being left behind and things are being outsourced, automated, so on and so forth. You have a choice. It's starve or take what job you can. That's the choice you have. There's more choice in what you're willing to deal with when you're motivated by self-interest. So if there's a particular client or contract that you no longer feel like a fit for, or you guys aren't working together or seeing eye to eye, you can procure other contracts. Is it easy? I'm not saying it's easy, but the dynamic is always different. There's a burden of responsibility. So as a contractor, you have far more responsibility and ownership and agency than you would if you were somebody that's an employee. That agency cannot be replicated in an employee dynamic. There are people who have more agency in their role than others, but ultimately a contractor is going to have more agency. So there's also a skill threshold. It's almost often separated by education, and we know this. To some degree, there's some level of training or education that needs to take place in order to be a contractor or a business owner. To some degree, whether you're an autodidact, you learn from apprenticeship, you learn from a boot camp, it doesn't matter. There had to be something that happened education-wise in order for you to become a contractor to some degree. So, but there's more freedom in this. There is less reliability in that world, but there is more freedom where things are not easily predicted. You can easily become an employee, and depending on what vertical you're in and what skill level, it's easy to become an employee. It's a lot harder to become a contractor or a business owner. The idea is survival versus slavery. Now, obviously, given my background, I know how harsh slavery was, and across very different cultures, but specifically with chattel slavery in America. So we're not going to compare those two things. But what I am telling you is it's a form of modern day slavery. There's this reliance on an employer and this dynamic where you are mistreated, you are infantilized, you are over supervised, you are micromanaged, and expectations can be unreal. Expectations can be dehumanizing. When you make it to contractor, business owner, self interest status, you can dictate those variables. So I think that curious people die in bondage. It's either by execution or suicide. And what do I mean by that is in an employment sense, in a professional sense, it's either professional execution, you get fired for your lack of fear, or it's suicide. You leave and you part ways with a lot of companies because not necessarily that things don't go your way, but there are certain dynamics that people who are motivated by self interest will not succumb to. And ultimately, until we can all get to that point of operating out of self interest, we unfortunately have to partake in the espionage that is being in a fear driven environment, even though you aren't afraid. Because I know you're not afraid. You're not afraid to. I mean, yeah, we got bills and we have responsibilities, but people who are motivated by self interest are not afraid to lose a job. They're not afraid to stand up for something that is right and push back on ideas that they don't think make sense. But ultimately, what you want to do and what you have to do is use fear until you can pursue self interest. Participate in those fear driven environments until you can get out. But just not lose sight of what you're truly motivated by, which is, if you're like me, self interest. Let me know what you think.